You need to get out there meeting people. That's why you're on LinkedIn. Do you know the ins and outs of it? Are you struggling? Do you need to raise some more capital? And what happens if you meet someone in real life? Well, we've got an expert today, Rob Giardinelli. He's with us, and he is going to teach us some ways that we can do live events to raise capital, to find investors, to meet partners, to have a good time. And so, Rob, welcome, man. Appreciate you being here.
Chris, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you and delve into this more.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And we've known each other a bit, and we've had some chats, and this has always been good and fun. And I'm really proud of myself that I nailed your last name. We both have like challenging last names, which is great.
I know,
Yeah.
and they sound, the funny thing is mine sounds exactly the way it's pronounced, and yours is a little bit different. So it's interesting. It's interesting how that works.
All wrong. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about what you do right now and what problems you solve.
Right. So I have a platform called Event Mindset. So I have started that as an additional conduit to the work I do, chronicling top social events and galas throughout the state of Texas. So I will regularly go to events in multiple markets all throughout the year. And I really get exposed to a wide range of people. And the reason I started Event Mindset was coming out of COVID, I found that people were really struggling with events. And even people who like 5 or 6 years ago, have been like, they would never have a challenge. We're all of a sudden having challenges. And I realized that, COVID brought a lot of anxiety and angst into people. And I really wanted to create a space and a platform that made people realize that no matter what your background is, no matter what your personality type is, there is a place for you at events. And in fact, those unique things that you think, oh, no one wants, are actually what make events more fun.
Oh, awesome. And I love the fact that this is about love. This is about self-love and knowing yourself and being the best version of yourself. It's funny, I didn't realize this before. I don't know why, but it just hit me when you were talking there that since COVID, I've changed too.
How have
And
you changed?
I'm less silly. I'm less silly. That was kind of the first thing I noticed when COVID happened, is that I'm less silly. I live in Minnesota. We have lots of lakes. And so every May we put docks in. And you remember May 2020, like COVID was the boogeyman.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen many people. And so I was outside with some friends. And one of my very closest friends looked at me and said, "You look pissed off." And I was like, "I'm not pissed off. You look pissed off." And he goes, "I'm lonely." I was like, "Me too. Me too." And I think that that's just kind of progressed here. And it's easier now that there's Zoom and all that kind of stuff to hide behind it and not get in the room. And so I'm really hoping that today we can help people figure out some simple steps so that they can get in the room or maybe even host an event, So when you say event, Rob, what do you mean?
So an event really can be, to me, it's anything where you are with a range of people or a group of people where there may be a common goal. It can be something as simple as a graduation party where you're acknowledging the compliments of someone. It could be a nonprofit gala where, people are there for a specific cause. It could be an event activation for a new brand. It could be a dinner party because you're celebrating, someone's promotion. It can really be any one of a wide range of things, but it's something where you're going to be put into a room with others where you may know everyone, some of the people, or none of the people. And, there are ways that you can approach any of those types of rooms with confidence. It's just making sure that you have the tools in your toolbox to do so.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, when we think of networking, I think of conferences, meetups, webinars, things like that. You mentioned a whole number of other things. So I think networking and events is just bigger than what a typical person thinks. Like really anything could be an event. And,
Absolutely.
And you mentioned, things like, a party for someone or a celebration, a brand redo. This could be like a happy hour or a meetup or a cocktail party or a charitable giving. How do you approach those? Is it the same or do you have like a different mindset for each one?
So what I do is with any event that I do, I set goals. They can be frivolous and trivial goals. They can be substantial and serious goals. And if you're less experienced, I say throw in some things that are going to throw in some goals that are going to give you confidence. It's not necessarily, I'm going to close this sale or get this investor today. It's about building confidence. And think of it this way. There are some people who will just do a cannonball into the deep end and they'll never dabble their toe in the pool. There are other people that will slide in off the side of the pool. And there are people that will be in the shallow end that will go down step by step by step. And it's just figuring out which one of those is best for you and then tailoring goals based on your comfort level of what it is that you want to do.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. I love that. And so, do you have some use cases or some examples of something that you've guided, some simple steps you've guided someone towards like really mastering an event?
So I always like to say, start with, if you're going to, let's say, a friend's annual holiday party and they make the best Christmas cookies you've ever had in your life and you're an introvert, you will want to get those and they'll probably run out. So that means, you know what, my goal may be I need to arrive when the party starts so that I can say hello to the guest. That's my second goal. And the third goal is I need to eat that chocolate chip and walnut cookie because I will not be able to live till next year if I don't. So it can start that simply. And it's just doing, expanding and building on it from there. It's really going to events. It's like a house. You need to start with a foundation. So don't, it's just like with anything. You want to acknowledge and celebrate the small wins to get there, but it's going to take time. I've been doing it for 15 years. And when I went to my first event, which was my first black tie event, I didn't own a tux. I had to run out and get one the week of that particular event to do it. But it was kind of like throwing yourself into the deep end of a pool. But what it taught me is that, you know what, I went through it, I did it, I met some nice people, and I took meeting those people in a space that I never thought I'd be in. And I used that and I was like, you know what, it wasn't that bad. I had nice conversations with about 15, 20 different people. And that allowed me to build the confidence with the next thing. So it wasn't necessarily about closing sales at the beginning. It was about feeling more comfortable. And the thing is that most people, especially now after COVID, people are kind of afraid to go to events. So if you're in front of somebody, you're actually going to get their mind share in a way. Like, it's great that we're talking on Zoom, but you can hear the door knocking, you can hear your pet barking or meowing, you can hear all those things that when you're in a room, in a space, it's just a different feeling. And you really can get really influential people's undivided attention.
That's pretty amazing. That's a cool hack. And I've got a couple follow-up questions to that. You mentioned that you started this 15 years ago and you didn't have a tux.
Yes.
So how the heck do you get started, on the path to creating Event Mindset?
Right place, right time. So I was in tech. So my career was in tech, and I met my husband I met him 13 and a half years ago. And his job was he ran luxury lifestyle magazines. So his job had been, for 6 or 7 years before he met me, was going to these types of events. And I knew that was part of his job. And I was like, okay, never done this before. We'll see how it goes. And I started going. I was like, oh, these are actually kind of fun. They're not these frivolous things where it's a bunch of rich, because I think people think that a lot of those events, it's rich people just dress up to make themselves look better. And I will tell you, having gone to 2,000 events, I have never been to a fun one that doesn't have a broad mix of people. If everyone's the same, and that's probably why I didn't mention things like business conferences in events, because I want to say everyone's kind of the same, but there's a little bit too much uniformity. And the really good events are just going to have a few unique people that really kind of help elevate the entire experience for people.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I wouldn't have thought about that. I would have thought that a good event would have like-minded people. You're saying it takes a diverse array of people because then they make the party more full, more robust.
So I'll give you an example. So I know you handle, you have real estate investors. So if you're hosting an event for real estate investors, it's not just about inviting potential investors. Make sure to look to invite some designers, maybe some project managers, bring some people in that are going to bring a little bit of a different viewpoint, but they'll be able to contribute something, probably something that you're not even going to see. And I will tell you, there is no such thing as mastering events. They are a continual learning experience. So anyone who says I've mastered them, don't listen to them, because one, they're constantly changing. And two, I will tell you, I probably learn more things going to an event now than I did a decade ago, just because I'm more aware. So I'll pay attention to maybe some more nuances that I wouldn't have 10 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome. And you mentioned before, like if I were to host like an investor meetup, how would someone go about hosting something? That seems like a really big lift. What are, from your mindset or from the event mindset, what should I be thinking of if I'm going to create the perfect event? And what I'm thinking of, just being transparently, is I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary here. And I was thinking of my wedding, about how we wanted to have like a cool party.
Okay.
And most of the time at weddings, it's like really loud dance floor, drinking, or nothing. And we're like, we wanted to have an alternative, right? So we had it outside. So there's a
Okay.
band outside and there's a swimming pool outside. We had like different yard games and all that kind of stuff. And the vibe was really good, but like people didn't really dance because there wasn't other people involved and kind of everyone was kind of scattered. And so I really don't have any sort of concept about hosting a big event. Should you have lots of things to do, not a lot of things to do? Tell me, give me the really like the 5 things I need to do to host an
So
awesome event.
the 5 things you need to host an awesome event is events are
Yeah.
like fingerprints and no two are the same. So
Oh,
sometimes you may need a lot of different things and experiences. Other times you may not. I always
okay.
kind of, when I
I'm downloading the Pinterest app right now because I think I'll need that, right?
And exactly. And the most important thing, and this will probably be controversial to people, is no one should be on every single one of your guest lists, period.
Mm,
And the reason for that is you want to be able to keep it interesting and mix it up. And by anybody, I mean your own spouse. And like, for example, I don't go to my husband's high school reunions. He has this friend from high school he goes with. It spares him the pain of having to introduce me to everybody and explaining it to them. And he gets to really have a good time. And I don't have to pretend to know who all these people are. So that's the first thing. The second thing is understand who your audience is. So, what you may want to, do experientially will be different if it's a cocktail reception versus a lunchtime thing versus a seated dinner versus, something that's going to be late at night. So you've really got to understand your audience in terms of that. 3, I would say understand your geography. The one thing that I have learned, and I have the good fortune of going to things in different cities, is I can do things in Houston that I could never in a million years get away with at an event here. So it's also understanding and treating the city that you're in, especially if you're a real estate investor looking to go into a different market. Don't go in with the toolkit of, well, this worked in Minneapolis, so I'm just going to convey that to Chicago. It won't work that way because the personality, I always like to think of cities as people with personalities. The personality of Chicago is different than the personality of Minneapolis. That's different than the personality of Austin. So, keeping all those things in mind is really important. 4th, any event that you throw, if there is one budget item you should never, ever cut, it is a photographer. And the reason for that is the photographer is the eyes and ears of your event. When you get the photos back, you'll see, I didn't know this person talked to this person. And if they're a good friend of yours, you will know that. And when you see them next time, you can actually ask them, hey, I saw that you were in a photo with X, Y, and Z. What were you all chatting about? They give you an eyes and ears and a lens. And it also is a really good way to visually see the things at your event. Because the event photographer, a good one, will get there early. They'll take, whatever activations you have or whatever bar you have set up. They'll take photos of all that beforehand. And then they'll take photos of people, whether they're posed or candids, throughout the fact. And then I would say 5th, use everything as a building block. So take the things that you've learned. I will tell you, I have never been to a perfect event. I know I will never be to a perfect event. So even if something I go to raises $5 million, there may, if everyone gets seated 15 minutes late, that means some of the meals are going to get cold. Just because everyone has this rip-roaring perfect time or great time doesn't mean that the event was perfect. So it's really understanding there is no such thing as a 100% event and there's no such thing as a 0% event. It's all a spectrum and a continuum somewhere in between 1 and 99.
You never been to the perfect event, huh? Well,
Never.
you never been to one of mine, Rob. You know? And we Minneapolis dudes, we just play more Prince than the Chicago
Well,
guy.
that's the perfect music for any party. So there you go.
Yeah? Yeah? You a Prince fan at events?
I love Prince. Yeah, I love, I love his music. Actually, I listened to Seven I was listening to like a Julie Brown back in the day replay on Sirius, and
Oh,
Seven was
yeah.
on one of the recent ones that I was listening to.
Oh, that's awesome. Downtown Julie Brown?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Downtown Julie Brown.
Cool. One of my friends sent me an email when he was arriving here in the airport. He's like, "You guys have a Prince store in the airport?" And I'm like, "Dude, we have 2 Prince stores in the airport." That's right.
Well, you
That's
need
right.
one for the Delta terminal, and you need one for everybody else.
Absolutely. Yep. 'Cause, yeah, the next time you need your purple coat in the airport, we've got you covered, man. And
Absolutely.
one thing I was thinking about before that I want to get back to when you were talking about goals of events, of attending events, and also you touched on it with goals of throwing events. It's not always about who you're going to talk to, what you're going to talk about, closing the deal, meeting certain people. I'm thinking of when you talked about you have to get there early, you have to have the chocolate chip cookie. And when you're hosting events, maybe you have to talk to one person or you want to have this one thing. It really stuck out to me that you can have fun with these goals and events in a way where it's not just always the pressure on meeting people. You know, it
Absolutely.
even how does that fit in with a game plan for looking at an event? Like, how do you do that?
So really think of it as your body is a muscle. No one is going to do shoulder presses 365 days a year. So you
Mm,
want to treat your event like an ensemble. Like I don't like using the word team because team is kind of a limiting word because everyone kind of has a set role. When you treat things like an ensemble, that means the
mhm,
photographer can do different things and be in different places. They may not necessarily follow your exact guidance, but they see that a bunch of people are gravitating towards a certain aspect of your event. Let's say, so I have this wonderful organization that I've worked with over the years called Vogue Vignettes, and they do these wonderful painted caricatures of people. There may be,
mm,
20 people waiting in line to get, a caricature of yourself done. And there may be people over there and you can take individual photos, but you can use those things to just see what works for your crowd and what doesn't. Use those things as a base, then take the things for the next event or next year, especially with it's that group, or be like, you know what, I tried this, but there's also this another organization I have called Typewriter Rodeo. So if it's a more literate crowd, you give them a phrase, they type a poem for you. And it's,
mm.
like this 14-line poem, and it's something you can frame in your house. So it's just paying attention to your audience and being the eyes and the ears. And also, if you're hosting something, make sure to introduce people to one
Mm,
another. So it's not
mhm.
about you. A good host is going to connect dots. So they're going to introduce other people so that other people see that you as a host are valuing them and their time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it makes people feel welcome. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
and so now we're getting into some controversial stuff here because I do that all the time because I'm an extrovert. But also, hey, Greg loves Typewriter Rodeo. All right, shout out Typewriter Rodeo. That's awesome. So I was saying, I'm an extrovert.
Mhm.
So I love introducing people because it checks the boxes for me of I think of myself as like a human golden retriever. I just go around getting pets on the head,
Mhm.
but I don't get to know anyone. So I love hosting
Mhm.
because I can say, "Hey, here's Rob, meet Greg, and you guys will get along with this." But I'm not actually having a conversation with you or getting to know anybody. And I think people have this wrong where they think extroverts are awesome at events and introverts aren't. Because I think it goes back to our misunderstanding of introverts versus extroverts.
Absolutely.
And introverts, it doesn't mean that you don't like people. Well, for some, maybe they don't,
Right.
but that happens with extroverts too. It's an energy level.
Totally.
Introverts will want to be around themselves to get energy. Extroverts will want to be around other people to get energy. And case in point, Kelly, my wife and I, we're opposites, and our
Okay.
schedules are the worst. So get this, Rob. I'm an extrovert who works alone at home. My wife works in a large office with people, and she's an introvert. So when I hear the garage door open, my tail starts thumping. And I'm like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. And she storms in, she's like, where are my crosswords? You know, like she just needs to sit down and chill for a half hour, but I have no energy. And suddenly now I'm getting some back. And so how does an introvert and an extrovert attack an event? Let's go with extroverts first.
So if you're an extrovert, I actually think it's harder for extroverts at events,
Yeah,
because if
agreed.
you think about it, people are attracted to an extrovert's charisma. So especially if you're in sales, this is a really tough one because you want information about your clients. You want to close more sales. But if you're
Mhm.
holding court, you can't really ask questions about somebody else, to bring that in. So I'm more introverted and my husband's more extroverted. So what
Mm.
I may do is, if I see he's talked to somebody for a little too long, I'll just grab him and be like, I want to introduce you to X, Y, and Z, to just get him out of that space so that he can go and he can chat with other people. So it's good to have kind of that balance. So like, if your wife, let's say, for example, it goes to an event with you and sees that, all she has to do is tap you on the shoulder and say, I want to introduce you to X. It allows you to kind of get out from that,
Mm.
just out from that space. It allows you to recollect your thoughts. And if you really did set a goal of, I want to talk to X, Y, and Z, it's almost like you're putting yourself in timeout for a minute. You're just
Mm.
giving yourself a pause, be like, okay, this is what I want to do. And then you get back into that mindset and you go ahead and you tackle that. Because for an extrovert, that's a really slippery slope. And I see a lot of them, they just go down it really quick and they wind up going to an event for 3 hours and they're like, well, I didn't learn anything. I
Mhm.
chatted the whole time, so it's very tough for them. And I don't think introverts realize that, just like I don't think extroverts realize. Introverts, especially if you're at a corporate event, introverts, especially if they're curious introverts, and if you work within an organization, you know who those people are. The curious introverts can ask questions and they can take in the information from other people. So you can learn valuable information, from a client. And I would say over the first year and a half, I was going to events with my husband, like on the way home, I'd be like, well, I learned this, 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 and this. He was like, you talked to each of those people for less than 3 minutes each. How did you find out all this information in an hour? And I was like, well, I just asked questions. And the thing is, most people do want to talk about themselves. So if you ask a couple of open-ended questions, a lot of people will just share everything. Even the introverts will wind up sharing everything. It's a little bit different. And I always like to say, you can tell an introvert that is an introvert that doesn't want to be there versus an introvert that does want to be there. Is an introvert that doesn't want to be there will give one-word answers nonstop. Whereas an
Mm.
introvert that wants to be there will give a one-word answer, then give a
Mm.
three-word answer, then give a one-phrase answer. Like they'll gradually open up. Think of it almost like, it's springtime. So think of it like a flower that's going into bloom.
Mm. Mhm. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I've noticed that too from introverts, that really a way that they can become a super networker is by having some scripted questions ahead of time, and they'll ask them, and then they'll be totally content with listening, which is really the power of networking, is
Absolutely.
listening. And that's awesome. And I've seen that before and I know what's happening, but just like you said, I'm an extrovert. I love holding court. And so I love having people around, we're sharing stories, all that kind of stuff, but we're not talking about anything meaningful. And so that's kind of a problem.
I wouldn't say not meaningful, but it's not what you want to talk about. It
Oh,
could be
that's a really good,
meaningful
yeah.
because it actually could be meaningful to the people you're talking to, but it's not meaningful to you. So,
Yeah.
it's important to realize that if you're holding court, what you're offering is value of someone, but you're not valuing yourself probably as much as you should be.
Mm. Yeah, I hear that, and oh man, I feel like I'm on like therapy session right now, Rob. You're right on, because a lot of times on the ride home, I'll say things to Kelly like, "I wish I would have had more time with this person. I wish I would have asked this person this thing," and I'm really kind of kicking myself, and I was be like, "How was your time, babe?" Because I'm off in La La Land. She'd be like, "Oh, it's great. I talked to this person for like 2 hours. They're really interesting. We're gonna join a book club together." And I'm like, "Man, you got stuff done." All I did was like share some silly stories or whatever. And so now we're talking about like a mix of people. And so what sort of mix of people, or how do you create like successful guests to your event? How do you add that element? Because you can plan everything and make it look really nice, but then we get into the gray area of people. And so how do you create that people onto your ensemble?
So I'm going to throw this kind of a little bit back. It's going to be a little bit of a round of ways to get there, but I think it will apply here. We're going to talk about real estate investing events. So
Hmm.
I would say any successful event that I know, people are involved. They're involved in their community. And especially if you're a real estate
Mm.
investor, the very first thing you can and should do is join a board of something or two somethings. Join an event committee because especially if you're working in the nonprofit space with real estate in particular. And every time I go to an event, I mean, I literally turn the corner and knock over five like dominoes, like every time I turn the corner in a space. The reason that they're there is they want to make their communities better. And real people who are looking for real estate investors, they want to create a new project. They want to build a new fourplex, whatever it is, to make their
Mhm.
community better. So join an affordable housing board,
Mm.
join something that interests you, like an arts board. Just because
Mhm.
you're in real estate doesn't mean you should necessarily focus in that. Because what I have found, and I have a podcast about nonprofits, the nonprofits are all interconnected, which means there are people with arts nonprofits that will deal with affordable housing nonprofits that will deal with animals nonprofits.
Mm.
All of it's
Mhm.
interconnected. So getting involved is really a good first step with that, with building your network. And once you have that, you'll be able to bring in different guests who have those shared interests. Because I will tell you, a lot of business gets done at seated dinners, at galas, at
Yeah.
cocktail parties, because there's just a mix of people. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize that this person had this in common. And then you start talking about that, and you can delve into a real estate investment from there. So a lot of it is you want to make sure you're involved with multiple aspects of your community so that people are always, they know that they're not going to get the same exact thing every single time they go to one of your events. And that's one of the
Mhm.
reasons why I may not go to an event for a while, like an annual one, is if it's the same thing year after year, there's only so many times I can go to that before I'm like, okay, I'm not getting my fill. I need to turn, pivot, and learn something else. So I'll look at a different organization to maybe go to every year, as opposed to one I've been going to each year for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Kelly and I go to a gala every year, charitable gala for a place I used to work for called The Link, and so it's changed a little bit. When I worked there, we helped kids who were on probation,
Okay.
get back into school and things like that. So we did some therapy and mentorship with them. Now, what they do is they have a lot of like housing for people, minors who are involved in like sex trafficking and things like that.
Okay.
And so obviously we want to do what we can to help out. And we realized that we needed to take a year off. And we weren't as intentional as you, but we realized we needed to take a year off because it was our third time going there. And it was the silent auction. And about an hour into it, I was telling Kelly, hey, I've got this and this and this. And she's like, shit, I think we're on the hook for like $30,000 of
Oh,
stuff. We're like, oh man.
time to pull back.
Yeah, totally, totally. We're like, oh man, we're a little too comfortable here at this place. And we ended up with some Airbnb in Florida, and I got a scooter, and like it was like ridiculous stuff. And that's fun. And charitable events are really important. I love that you're going to stuff like that. And so I was gonna ask you something. Oh, May is mental health awareness month. Did you know that?
I did.
Awesome. And what we know about mental health or mental illness is that stress makes things worse. I think in
Mhm.
health class we learned that there's two types of stress, right? The bad stress and the good stress. I think now in 2024 we can say stress is just bad. Because you add stress to the
Yeah.
mix, other things that are there makes things worse. Events, networking, talking with other people tends to add stress. How can someone de-stress or take the pressure off before an event and during an event?
So I'm glad you asked that question. So I think the one thing that stresses people out is, what if no one likes me? And they go and
Mm.
they talk to someone and they kind of blow them off. It's not about them, it's not about you, it's about them. And it's just important to keep that in mind, because if you're in a room with 100 people and one person doesn't like you, there are 98 other people. Think about it. I want everyone here who's listening. If you've met the last 100 people you've met, Have you liked all 100 of them? I think almost every single person is going to say no. So just remember that. It's not, this person does not speak for a room full of 100, 200, 500, however many people are there. Just be like, that's on them. That's not on me. It has nothing to do with me. They could be having a bad day. They, may have gotten into an argument with somebody just before. They may have just heard some unsettling news, especially if it's a business networking event, from somebody else. You just don't know what the dynamics are. But I found that most people, it's rarely about you. And then the other thing that stresses people out is I said something that offended them. And I will tell you, the first couple of years I went to events, every single time I said something out of turn, I would stress out about it for days sometimes, depending on who it was and how bad it was. And what I realized is 98% of the time, people didn't remember it. And I've learned along the way is the only time that people actually remember it is if you make a thing about it. So if you just say, I'm sorry, let's move on, people will forget about it. But if you go on about it for 5 minutes, they're going to remember that and not have a good memory and a good experience with that. Because, when you leave an event, you want a feeling. So long as the feeling is good from that person holistically from the event, they're going to think of you positively as well. So just remember that. So even though you think it's a catastrophic thing you said, most of the time, I won't say all the time, but most of the time, that's not the case.
Sure. It's just spotlight effect. We feel like
Absolutely.
everyone's focused on us. Hey, I'm the ballerina at the middle of the floor. Everyone's looking at me, but it's not the case. You're in a room with a ton of other people. Who cares? And I think people should take more risks with what they say, because that's what makes you stand out. Sharing things about hobbies, about things that you're into, about things you don't like is going to connect you more with people than how are things? Good, fine. What's your 5-year goal? Strategic planning, all that kind of stuff that's so boring. Add a little personality to it. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And if anyone's stuck, always just ask the obvious thing in common. What brought you here today? How are you tied to? What do you like about this charity? Whatever it is, there's always a simple place to start. And really, that's kind of, it's spring. That's the seed that allows things to grow. So just start with the most obvious question, because immediately you're already placing yourself with something in common with that person. Even though you've never met them, you're both there. So you have some sort of shared interest. Start with that question. And knowing that going in, that reduces so much stress, because it's not, oh my God, I have to say something. I have to do an opening line for every single person. That's just not the case. That's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm thinking of like the movie Inception. Have you seen the movie Inception?
I have not, but I've heard about it.
You haven't seen the movie Inception?
I have not.
My goodness.
I'm more of a vintage, I'm more, like in the watch, Sunset Boulevard and The Breakfast Club. So I'm kind of a little bit more vintage in my movie choices.
Okay. Well, I'm going to challenge you to watch Inception, because it's a good one. It makes you think.
Okay.
But anyway, it's about dreams. And one of the, I won't give it away, but kind of one of the things I was thinking of in dreams is that you never know how they start. You're just suddenly in them. And it seems like a good conversation is the same. You don't remember how they started. You never remember the first line. So it might as well be something scripted or thought of ahead of time. What brought you here? What do you think about this? Oh, tell me about those Minnesota Timberwolves. Are they going to lose it? Like whatever dumb thing it could be, to just start a conversation so you're on the same side of the table. And then just like a dream, you're in the middle of the conversation. You don't know how it started. That happens with fights in relationships. What the heck were we even fighting about? I don't know. I'm pissed off about something, but I don't remember. So I think that's a really valid point, to have some like good openers.
Oh, absolutely. And even people I'll be like, people are best friends. I'm like, how did you two meet? And they're like, I'm not sure. And there are people that have been, involved in the community. They're like, I think we served on something together, but I couldn't tell you what it was. Like, it's, it's interesting. People they can only remember so much, and they're only going to take with them so much. So it's just, remembering that spotlight it's not on you. It's going to be on the event host. It's going to be on the catering. It's going to be on the bartenders and the beverages. It's going to be on, if there's a celebrity there, the eyes are going to be on other things, and you're going to be about 40th on just about any other person's list.
Yeah, right on. Hey, you mentioned celebrities. Who's the biggest celebrity you've seen at an event?
At an event, I just went to Matthew McConaughey's gala that raised $15 million for various children's nonprofits, throughout the U.S. So I guess
Whoa.
that would be the most recent one. And I'm going tomorrow night to a gala to honor what's his name, Glenn Powell, who is going to be in. He has this new movie out. There's a premiere tonight called Hitman on Netflix.
Cool. Exciting stuff, man.
So yeah,
And what do you do?
I guess I've had a busy month.
Yeah, you have or a busy couple days. Wow. I'm like having a fire and a cigar in back. You're like out there putting a tux on.
Chris,
I
that
should
sounds
maybe put a
nice.
tux on for it. What's that?
I said that sounds nice.
Yeah, right on. Um, can I ask you a few questions just to wrap up?
Absolutely, go for it.
Awesome. What is something about your field, your industry, what you do that you wish people knew that they always get wrong?
That going to nonprofit events where people are dressed up are not frivolous. There is so much substantial work going on. The amount raised benefits children, benefits animals, benefits the arts, benefits hospitals. Go into any of those types of events with an open mind, because you'll meet a much wider range of people than you ever thought you would.
That's really good. That's really good. Okay, what pisses you off?
If I ever go to anything seated and people switch place cards. That happened to me once in an event where the host knew where everyone was. And I
Mhm.
thought I was going to be in trouble, but the person looked down the table and saw that basically other person swapped seats because they wanted to sit next to the person they arrived to the event with.
Interesting. Yeah, that does bug people, doesn't it? I can see that.
Yeah, especially when you knew where you were seated, because I scoped it out beforehand. Yeah, that was not a that was that was definitely a pet peeve. And I wound up being seated next to the person. I was an out of town thing that I was staying with. So actually, I wound up spending more time with them than I was able to the entire rest of the weekend I was there. So it all worked out.
Cool. That's awesome. It always does work out.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good lesson. Last, where do you see events in 10 years from now? How are they going to be different?
I think 10 years from now, people coming out of COVID, people have definitely been more intentional. I think it'll be interesting to see if they're as large scale, especially nonprofit ones, as they were before.
Mhm.
I'll be curious to see if I'm not sure if they'll necessarily go away, but I think they'll be fewer and they'll probably be a little bit more impactful.
Okay. So fewer events, bigger events, more impactful, intentional. There's a reason we're getting together.
Yeah, the intentionality coming out of COVID, and I don't think that's going away. Like there are certain things, yes, they were flashes in the pan for COVID, but there's other things like most auctions now are online. Whereas before
Mm.
COVID, sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. And if they were, the software didn't always work. Whereas now most of them are a pretty seamless experience.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I remember like pre-COVID, every online thing started the same. It was like, sorry, give me a minute. I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
the tech, right? Like that's how they all started. And now we've got to
They
figure it
were
out.
painful, Chris. God, they were painful, but they're not
So
now.
bad. So bad. So bad. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rob, for being here. I really appreciate that. And I want to put the spotlight on you for a second. Any final thoughts or things that you want people to know about events?
So just remember, you're a part of an ensemble. You don't necessarily have to go in with a set role, especially if you're an introvert. Go where the energy takes you, like you were saying earlier in the event. If you're curious, ask questions. Just because you're not doing the talking doesn't mean you're not valued. And in fact, think of it like a pressure cooker. A room has to have introverts and extroverts in order to be successful. So if there were only extroverts in the room, there'd be an explosion because there would be two alphas getting into a fight. Whereas if it's only introverts, there wouldn't be enough oxygen in the room. So remember, you're doing your part to create Earth, to create a healthy amount of oxygen that allows us to all live, survive, and thrive.
Oh, well said. Well said. And from the psychology standpoint, in terms of interpersonal communication, which is kind of like how people are attracted to other people, the number one best way to be interesting is to be interested in the other person. And so that's where introverts have a real awesome power.
Mm-hmm.
is because they're interested in the other person.
Oh, introverts are way more. I mean, the things that they kind of will talk about and divulge, it's like watching, instead of watching kind of a 30-minute comedy where everything is just out there really fast, it's like watching a 10-episode miniseries. It just kind of slowly unfolds, it slowly evolves, and there's just really these interesting edges about people that, as introverts especially, that you see over time. I mean, I find people fascinating, but I find introverts really, really fascinating because you never know what you're going to get with them.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, Rob, thank you so much for being here. And for all the LinkedIn fam out there, take the pressure off of events. Get yourself some scripted questions ahead of time. Remember that the number one way to be interesting is to be interested, and just find the flow of your energy. And you're going to meet people. Who cares? Have a little fun. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday at 1 p.m. when we do another live stream. I'm Chris Schwegel, CEO and founder of Infinite Skies. We do performance psychology for real estate syndicators. Take care.